The crystal towers of Zethkara stretched toward the purple sky like frozen lightning. Inside the largest tower, 12 alien species sat around a table made from a single piece of star diamond. This was the Galactic Council, rulers of 3,000 worlds and masters of everything they could see in the night sky. Ambassador Velthar of the Kethmori stood at the center of the room. His forearms moved in graceful patterns as he spoke. His skin was pale blue and covered in scales that caught the light from the room's floating orbs. When he opened his mouth, rows of sharp teeth gleamed. "Honored council members," Velthar began, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We have a problem. A new species has appeared in Sector 7741. They call themselves humans." A low rumble came from the Gronak representative. The massive creature looked like a walking mountain of rock and metal. "Another primitive species?" the Gronak asked. "Why do we waste time on such matters?" Velthar's eyes flashed with anger. "Because these humans are different. They do not bow. They do not ask permission. They simply take what they want." The council chamber filled with whispers and clicks from the various species. The ethereal ones floated above their seats, their ghostly forms shimmering with disapproval. The insect-like Zephyrians buzzed their wings in agitation. Even the plant-based Verdani rustled their leaves with concern. "Explain," demanded High Counselor Thexaran of the ruling Kethmori. She was ancient even by council standards, having lived for over 2,000 years. Her voice could make stars tremble. Velthar activated a holographic display above the table. Images of human ships and colonies appeared in the air. The ships looked crude compared to council vessels. They were made of metal and ceramic instead of living crystal or pure energy. Their weapons were simple projectiles and primitive fusion bombs. 3 months ago, our scouts found this species on a small blue world in the Outer Rim, Velthar continued. They had just discovered faster-than-light travel. By council law, all new species must submit to our authority before expanding beyond their home system. The display showed human colonies spreading across multiple star systems. Cities grew on planets that the council had marked as restricted. Mining operations stripped resources from worlds that belonged to the council by ancient right. "Did you send the standard demands?" asked the Murthani representative. The aquatic being spoke through a water-filled helmet that covered her fish-like head. "Of course," Velthar replied. "We sent 3 diplomatic vessels with the usual message. Submit to council authority. Abandon your illegal colonies. Prepare for integration into our empire." And their response. High Counselor Thexaran leaned forward in her seat. Velthar's scales darkened with embarrassment. "They destroyed our ships." The chamber erupted in shocked noises. The crystalline shard-high chimed like broken bells. The energy beings called the Fluxari crackled with electricity. Even the peaceful Zendari, who had not spoken in war for centuries, made sounds of disbelief. "Impossible," declared General Corks of the warrior Brutali. His reptilian features twisted into a snarl. "No primitive species has ever attacked council vessels and survived." "The humans did not just attack," Velthar said quietly. "They studied our ships first. They waited until our vessels came close enough to their stations. Then they launched coordinated strikes using weapons we did not expect." The holographic display showed the battle. Human ships, small and fast, swarmed around the larger council vessels. They used their primitive missiles in clever ways, targeting shield generators and weapon systems. When the council ships tried to retreat, the humans followed them, never giving up the chase. "They fought like animals," Velthar continued. "No honor, no ceremony. They simply wanted to win." High Counselor Thexaran stood slowly. Her presence filled the room like a cold wind. "How many ships did we lose?" "All 3 vessels. 237 council citizens dead." Velthar's voice was barely a whisper. The chamber fell silent. In 3,000 years of council rule, no primitive species had ever killed so many council members. Most new civilizations surrendered immediately when they saw council technology. The few that resisted were crushed within days. "What do we know about their military capabilities?" asked Admiral Zexran of the council fleet. He was also Kethmori, but younger than the High Counselor. His scales were silver instead of blue, marking him as a military caste. Velthar gestured to the display again. "They have approximately 2,000 ships scattered across 12 star systems. Most are cargo vessels or civilian transports. Only about 300 are true warships. 300 ships against our entire fleet." General Corks laughed, showing rows of sharp teeth. This will be over in days. Their technology is primitive, Velthar agreed. No energy shields. No plasma weapons. No quantum computers. They still use metal hulls and chemical rockets for many tasks. The ethereal representative spoke in a voice like wind through empty spaces. Perhaps we should study them first. Learn why they resist when others submit. No, High Counselor Thexeran said firmly. The Council has ruled this galaxy for 3 millennia. We have brought peace and order to countless worlds. We will not allow one stubborn species to challenge our authority. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. These humans have made their choice. They have attacked Council vessels. They have ignored our lawful demands. They have shown that they cannot be trusted to join galactic civilization. The High Counselor raised her primary arm. I call for a vote. All in favor of declaring the human species a threat to galactic peace and ordering their complete elimination? One by one, the representatives raised their hands, tentacles, claws, or energy fields. The Gronak representative's massive stone fist crashed down on his voting pad. The Zephyrian Queen buzzed her approval. The plant-like Verdani extended glowing vines. Even the peaceful Zendari gave their consent with a sad but firm gesture. Only the ethereal ones abstained, floating silently above their seats. The motion passes, High Counselor Thexeran declared. Admiral Zexran, you will take the 47th Fleet to human space. Destroy their colonies. Destroy their ships. Leave no trace of this species to threaten galactic peace. Admiral Zexran stood and saluted. It will be done, High Counselor. How long should we expect this operation to take? The High Counselor considered the question. Based on their primitive technology and small numbers? 2 months at most, probably less. Should we prepare additional fleets? The Admiral asked. Several Council members laughed at the suggestion. The idea that 300 primitive ships could stand against a full Council fleet was ridiculous. The 47th Fleet alone had over 1,000 vessels, each one more advanced than anything the humans could build. That will not be necessary, High Counselor Thexeran said dismissively. Send one fleet. Make the humans an example to any other species that might consider defying Council authority. As the Council session ended, the representatives began to leave. They spoke quietly among themselves about other matters, trade disputes, territorial claims, minor rebellions on distant worlds. The human problem was already forgotten by most of them. But as Admiral Zexran walked toward his transport, he felt a strange unease. Something about the human attack bothered him. Primitive species were supposed to be terrified of Council technology. They were supposed to surrender when faced with superior force. The humans had done neither. They had fought. And they had won. The Admiral shook his head, dismissing his doubts. The humans had surprised one small diplomatic mission. They would not surprise a full military fleet. In 2 months, this stubborn species would be nothing but dust drifting between the stars. The Council had spoken. The humans would be eliminated. It was that simple. Admiral Zexran stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Glory. The massive ship stretched for 3 kilometers and housed 50,000 crew members. Its crystal hull gleamed with embedded energy shields that could stop anything short of a supernova. The weapons could crack planets in half. Around the Eternal Glory, 999 other ships of the 47th Fleet moved through space like a school of deadly fish. Each vessel was a masterpiece of Council engineering, built with technology perfected over thousands of years. Admiral, called Navigation Officer Plexuri from her station. We are approaching the outer edge of human space. First target is the Kepler system. Zexran nodded, his silver scales catching the light from the bridge displays. According to intelligence reports, Kepler was home to 3 human colonies and a major mining operation. It would be the perfect place to demonstrate Council power. Communications. Open a channel to the human settlements, the Admiral ordered. The main screen flickered to life, showing a middle-aged human male in a simple uniform. Behind him, Zexran could see a command center filled with primitive screens and blinking lights. The technology looked incredibly crude compared to Council systems. This is Admiral Zexran of the Galactic Council 47th Fleet, he announced in perfect human language. The Council's translation systems were flawless. By order of the High Council, you are commanded to surrender immediately. Power down your ships and prepare for evacuation. The human on the screen looked tired but not afraid. This is Commander Jackson of Kepler Station. Admiral. I'm going to give you one chance to turn around and leave our space. Several bridge officers made sounds of disbelief. A primitive species was threatening a council admiral? The idea was absurd. Zexran remained calm. Commander Jackson, you are facing 1,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your entire species has fewer than 300 military vessels. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick, Commander Jackson smiled grimly. Admiral, you made one big mistake coming here. And what mistake is that? Zexran asked, amused. You think this is going to be easy? The communication ended abruptly. Zexran stared at the blank screen for a moment, then turned to his weapons officer. Target their orbital stations. Fire at will. The Eternal Glory's main cannon charged with a sound like singing crystal. A beam of pure energy lanced out across space, striking one of the human mining platforms. The structure vanished in a flash of light, vaporized instantly. Direct hit, reported the weapons officer. Target destroyed. Around the fleet, other ships opened fire. Plasma bolts and energy beams reached out toward human installations. Within minutes, 2 of the 3 orbital platforms were nothing but expanding clouds of debris. Human response? Zexran asked. Minimal, the sensor officer replied. They are launching small craft from the remaining station and the planetary surface. Approximately 60 vessels approaching. Zexran looked at the tactical display. 60 ships against 1,000. The humans were either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Their largest ship is only 400 meters long. The sensor officer continued. No energy shields detected. They appear to be using projectile weapons and primitive missiles. Eliminate them, Zexran ordered. The first wave of human ships entered weapons range. The council vessels opened fire with precise calculated shots. Plasma beams designed to disable rather than destroy reached out toward the human vessels. That was when everything went wrong. Instead of trying to dodge or return fire at long range, the human ships accelerated directly toward the council fleet. Their primitive engines screamed as they pushed past safe limits, racing straight into the energy barrage. Sir, the tactical officer said with confusion in his voice, the humans are not trying to avoid our weapons. Zexran watched in growing alarm as human ships took hit after hit but kept coming. Their metal hulls glowed red-hot from energy impacts. Pieces of armor flew off in all directions. Any sensible species would have retreated by now. They are on collision courses with our ships, the navigation officer announced. Impossible, Zexran muttered. No species is that insane. But the humans were. The first human vessel, a small cargo ship converted to carry weapons, slammed directly into the council destroyer, Sharp Wind. Both ships vanished in a massive explosion that lit up space for thousands of kilometers. Report, Zexran shouted over the alarms now blaring across the bridge. The human ship detonated its fusion reactor at the moment of impact, the tactical officer said in disbelief. The Sharp Wind is completely destroyed. More human ships followed the same suicidal pattern. They ignored council weapons fire, racing directly toward the nearest enemy vessel. When they made contact, they exploded with the force of small stars. Full defensive fire, Zexran ordered. Stop them before they reach our ships. The council fleet poured energy into space, trying to vaporize the attacking humans before they could make contact. But the human ships were small and fast, and their pilots seemed to have no fear of death. A human destroyer, its hull melting from repeated plasma hits, crashed into the council cruiser, Majestic Dawn. The explosion created a brief new sun in the Kepler system. Sir, we are losing ships faster than we can replace them, the tactical officer reported. The humans are not fighting like any species we have encountered. Zexran stared at the battle display in horror. In 30 minutes of combat, the council had lost 12 major vessels. The humans had lost 40 ships, but they seemed willing to trade their lives for council ones without hesitation. New contacts, the sensor officer announced. More human ships approaching from the inner system. Zexran looked at the screen. Another wave of human vessels was racing toward them, including what appeared to be civilian cargo haulers and mining ships. All of them had been hastily fitted with weapons and explosives. They are turning their entire civilization into a weapon, the tactical officer whispered. A human mining barge, massive and slow but incredibly tough, rammed directly through the council formation. Its hull was covered in armor plating welded on in obvious haste. As council ships fired at it, the barge's crew activated explosive charges throughout the vessel. The explosion destroyed 3 council ships and damaged 5 others. Admiral, the communications officer said urgently. "We are receiving reports from the other task forces. The humans are using the same tactics at every target. They are ramming our ships wherever we engage them." Zexran felt something he had never experienced before in battle. Fear. Not fear of death, but fear of an enemy that could not be understood or predicted. "How many ships have we lost fleet-wide?" he asked quietly. 47 destroyed, 23 heavily damaged," came the reply. In less than 2 hours, the Council had lost more ships than they had in the previous century of expansion, and the humans were still fighting. "Sir," the navigation officer said, "the surviving human vessels are withdrawing to the inner system." Zexran nodded grimly. "Let them go. Reform the fleet. We need to regroup and assess our losses." As the 47th Fleet pulled back from Kepler, Admiral Zexran stared at the tactical reports streaming across his screens. The humans had lost 63 ships and all their orbital installations. By any normal measure, the Council had won a decisive victory, but Zexran felt like he had lost something important. The humans had shown that Council technology could be defeated by sheer determination and willingness to die. They had proven that superior firepower meant nothing against an enemy that refused to be intimidated. "Communications," he said finally. "Send a message to Council High Command. Request additional fleets for the human campaign." "Additional fleets, sir?" the communications officer asked in surprise. "Our intelligence estimated this species would surrender after losing their first engagement." Zexran looked out at the stars where human ships had died, taking Council vessels with them into the dark. "Our intelligence was wrong," he said quietly. "Send the message. We are going to need more ships." As the report traveled back toward Council space, Admiral Zexran began to understand that this war would not be the quick victory everyone expected. The humans fought with a ferocity that the Council had never encountered. They treated their own lives as weapons to be spent for victory. For the first time in his long military career, Zexran wondered if the Council had made a terrible mistake. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the laboratory aboard Luna Station, staring at the most important prisoner of war in human history. The alien floated in a specialized containment unit, filled with a liquid that matched the atmosphere of its homeworld. It was a Kethmori, one of the ruling species of the Galactic Council. The creature was beautiful in an alien way. Its blue scales shifted color with its emotions, and its forearms moved with fluid grace even in captivity. But Sarah was not interested in its beauty. She was interested in its weaknesses. "Subject shows elevated stress responses when exposed to unpredictable stimuli," she dictated to her recording device. "Unlike humans who adapt to chaos through experience, this species appears to require ordered, predictable environments to function effectively." The Kethmori prisoner, who called himself Velkoth, watched her with intelligent eyes. Through the translation device, he had already told her everything he knew about Council military doctrine, ship designs, and strategic planning, not because he wanted to help humanity, but because he could not understand why they would not surrender. "Your species is doomed," Velkoth said through the translator. "The Council has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. We have destroyed civilizations with 1 billion times your population." Sarah looked up from her notes. "Maybe that's your problem. I do not understand." "You've never faced real resistance before," Sarah explained. "Every species you've encountered has either surrendered immediately or been too primitive to fight back effectively. You've never had to adapt to a determined enemy." She gestured to the data screens around the laboratory. "Your ships are magnificent. Your weapons are incredibly powerful. Your technology is thousands of years ahead of ours. But you know what you don't have?" Velkoth waited silently. Experience with desperate enemies who refused to quit. 3 levels below the laboratory, Captain Marcus Webb stood in the war room of Luna Station. Around him, holographic displays showed the current state of human space. Red markers indicated systems under Council attack. Blue markers showed human fleet positions. Yellow markers represented evacuation routes for civilian populations. There was a lot more red than blue. "Status report," Marcus said to the assembled officers. Commander Lisa Park, his intelligence chief, stepped forward. "The Council has deployed 3 additional fleets since Kepler. They're moving more cautiously now, but they're still advancing. We've evacuated 17 colonies and pulled our forces back to the inner systems." "Casualties?" Marcus asked grimly. "Heavy. We've lost 60% of our original fleet, but we've taken down over 200 Council ships in return. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the mathematics of the situation. Humanity had started with 300 military vessels. The Council had thousands. Even with favorable exchange rates, the humans would run out of ships long before the Council did. What about the new construction? Marcus asked. Chief Engineer Rodriguez answered from across the room. We've got every shipyard in human space working around the clock. But, sir, we can't build ships fast enough to replace our losses. Then we change how we fight, Marcus said simply. On the main display, he brought up footage from the Battle of Kepler, human ships ramming Council vessels, accepting certain death to take the enemy with them. It was effective, but it was also unsustainable. The Council expects us to fight like they do, Marcus continued. Big fleets meeting in open space, formal battles with clear winners and losers. That's how they've always fought, and that's how they expect us to fight. What are you suggesting? Asked Admiral Chen Wei-Lin, the highest-ranking officer present. Marcus smiled grimly. We make them play by our rules instead of theirs. He touched the display, bringing up a new tactical projection. Guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run attacks, sabotage, psychological operations. Everything that made warfare on Earth so brutal and unpredictable. The Council ships are too advanced for conventional ambush tactics, Commander Park pointed out. Then we don't use conventional tactics, Marcus replied. He zoomed in on a section of the display showing a Council supply convoy. Dr. Chen's research shows that their species are highly dependent on routine and predictability. They follow the same routes, use the same formation patterns, even schedule their rest periods the same way. So we disrupt their routines, Admiral Chen said, understanding dawning in her voice. Exactly. We attack their supply lines instead of their warships. We hit their logistics bases instead of their fleet formations. We make them afraid to follow their normal procedures. The plan that emerged over the next 6 hours was unlike anything in human military history. Small groups of ships would operate independently, striking at Council forces when and where they least expected it. Civilian vessels would be converted into weapons platforms, their innocent appearance hiding missile batteries and boarding teams. Most importantly, every human ship would carry nuclear charges powerful enough to take down a Council vessel if used properly. The ramming tactics from Kepler had shown that Council shields were designed to stop energy weapons, not physical impacts. A ship moving fast enough with enough explosive power could penetrate any defense. It's going to be dangerous, Marcus warned the assembled officers. More dangerous than anything we've tried before. A lot of our people aren't coming home. They're not coming home anyway if we lose this war, Admiral Chen replied quietly. As the meeting ended and officers departed to implement the new strategy, Dr. Chen's voice echoed through the station's communication system. She was broadcasting on all frequencies, addressing every human in space. Citizens of Earth and the colonies, her voice began. The Galactic Council has declared war on our species. They believe we are primitive. They believe we will surrender when faced with superior technology. They believe we are weak. Throughout human space, people stopped what they were doing to listen. Factory workers building weapons, farmers growing food for military rations, children in schools learning about their new alien enemies. The Council has ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years, Dr. Chen continued. They have conquered countless worlds and destroyed entire civilizations. Their ships are faster than ours. Their weapons are more powerful. Their technology is more advanced. She paused, letting the weight of humanity's situation sink in. But they have never faced anything like us. They have never encountered a species forged in the crucible of planetary warfare. They have never fought enemies who turn every ship into a weapon, every factory into an armory, every citizen into a soldier. On Europa, mining teams began converting their drilling equipment into ship-killing weapons. On Mars, children as young as 12 volunteered for military service. On Earth itself, every major corporation retooled their production lines to build instruments of war. The Council thinks this war will last 2 months, Dr. Chen's voice continued. They think we will break when we see their power. They think we will surrender when we count our losses. In the laboratory, she looked directly at the Kethmori prisoner as she spoke her final words. They don't understand that humans don't break. We bend, we adapt, we learn. And when someone tries to destroy us, we become something they never expected. Velkoth watched her with growing alarm as the translation device conveyed her words. What do you become? He asked quietly. Dr. Chen smiled, but there was no warmth in it. we become their worst nightmare. Within hours of the broadcast, reports began coming in from across human space. Civilian cargo ships were volunteering for combat conversion. Retired military officers were returning to service. Even the colony ships carrying evacuated families were requesting weapon installations. Most importantly, intelligence reports showed something unprecedented happening on the rim worlds. Species that had been conquered by the Council centuries ago were beginning to whisper among themselves. Some were quietly sabotaging Council supply lines. Others were simply refusing to cooperate with Council authorities. The war that the Council expected to last 2 months was becoming something much larger and more dangerous. It was becoming a galactic revolution, with humanity as the spark that lit the fire. And at the center of it all, humans prepared to show the galaxy what 3 billion years of evolution's most successful predators could do when they decided to fight for their survival. Admiral Chen Weilin floated in the command center of the stealth ship Silent Arrow, watching the most important battle of the war unfold on her screens. Around the gas giant Proxima, 600 Council ships hung in perfect formation, their energy shields creating a barrier of light that could be seen from orbit. They were hunting for human raiders who had been attacking Council supply convoys for 3 months. What they didn't know was that the human fleet was already there, hidden in the planet's radiation shadow, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Admiral," whispered Captain Torres from the navigation station. "All ships report ready. The Council fleet is holding position as predicted." Chen nodded, studying the enemy formation. The Council ships were arranged in their traditional battle pattern. Heavy cruisers in the center, destroyers forming a protective screen, command vessels safely in the rear. It was a formation that had dominated galactic warfare for centuries. It was also predictable, rigid, and about to be shattered. "Signal all ships," Chen ordered quietly. "Execute broken mirror." Throughout the radiation field, human vessels powered up their engines. They weren't the sleek warships that humanity had started the war with. Those ships were gone, destroyed in dozens of desperate battles. These were improvised weapons platforms built from whatever materials could be found. Cargo haulers with missile pods welded to their hulls. Mining ships equipped with nuclear rams. Even passenger liners converted into carriers for small attack craft. Every vessel was a unique adaptation, built by desperate engineers who had learned to see opportunity in everything. The first wave emerged from the planet's shadow like ghosts materializing from nothing. 50 small craft, each one painted to match the background radiation and equipped with stealth systems reverse-engineered from captured Council technology. The Council sensors detected them immediately, but identification took precious seconds. Were they asteroids, debris? By the time the alien computers recognized them as ships, the human craft were already inside the defensive perimeter. "Contact," shouted the Council sensor operator aboard the flagship Inevitable Victory. "Multiple human vessels approaching from Vector 77 Mark 9. Admiral Zexran, who had grown thin and nervous over months of fighting humans, rushed to his command station. "How many ships?" 50 confirmed, sir. Small craft, possibly fighters." Zexran relaxed slightly. 50 ships against 600 was hardly a threat, even if they were inside the formation. "All vessels target the human craft. Destroy them." The Council ships began turning their massive weapons toward the approaching humans. Plasma cannons that could vaporize asteroids locked onto the small craft. Energy batteries designed to crack moons prepared to fire. That was when the second wave attacked. From the opposite side of the formation, 200 more human ships emerged from hiding. These were larger vessels, converted freighters and modified warships that had been waiting in the radiation shadow of Proxima's largest moon. "Admiral," the sensor operator's voice cracked with panic. "More contacts. 200 ships attacking from our rear." But Admiral Chen wasn't finished. As the Council fleet tried to respond to attacks from 2 directions, the third phase of Broken Mirror began. The human ships that had been identified as small fighters suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds. Their crews had done something no Council engineer would ever consider. They had removed all safety systems from their engines and set the reactors to overload. Instead of firing weapons, the human craft simply rammed into the nearest Council ships at velocities that turned metal into plasma. Each impact created an explosion that lit up space and sent shockwaves through the alien formation. They're using their fighters as missiles, Admiral Zexran shouted in disbelief. The Council formation, designed to repel external attacks, began to collapse from within. Ships collided with each other as they tried to avoid the human suicide craft. The careful spacing that had protected them for centuries became a weakness as explosions chain reacted through their ranks. That was when Admiral Chen played her final card. All ships, execute Thunder Run, she commanded. From every direction around Proxima, from behind asteroids, from within debris fields, from the planet's upper atmosphere, the rest of the human fleet appeared. 300 ships that had been hiding for days, waiting for this moment. Unlike the first waves, these ships were built for a single purpose, to break through Council lines and reach the command vessels. They were heavily armored rams powered by fusion drives that had been pushed beyond their design limits. The inevitable victory found itself surrounded by burning Council ships as human vessels carved through the formation, like sharks attacking a school of fish. Admiral Zexran watched in horror as his perfectly ordered battle line disintegrated into chaos. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple vessels. The Sharp Talon has lost main power. The Eternal Might is abandoning ship. How many ships have we lost?" Zexran asked quietly. 200 confirmed destroyed, another 100 heavily damaged or surrendering. In less than an hour, the Council had lost half their fleet. The humans had lost almost all of theirs. But they had achieved something no species had done in 3,000 years. They had broken a Council battle, formation through pure tactical brilliance. But the victory at Proxima was only part of a larger story, unfolding across the galaxy. On the industrial world of Kethvar, the Vorthak mining guilds received a secret transmission from human operatives. The message was simple: sabotage Council supply lines, and humanity would share captured technology with anyone who helped them. The Vorthak were a proud species who had been forced into slavery by the Council centuries ago. Their answer came in the form of explosions that destroyed 3 major weapons factories and cut power to half the planet. In the Andorian sector, the aquatic Myrthani began refusing to provide biotechnology to Council ships. Without their living hull regeneration systems, damaged Council vessels had to return to distant repair facilities instead of healing themselves in battle. Most shocking of all, the peaceful Zendari began hiding Council refugees who were fleeing from human attacks. The species that had not spoken of war for 1,000 years quietly opened their borders to defeated Council forces, then refused to tell human raiders where they had gone. High Counselor Thexaran received these reports in her crystal tower on Zethkara, feeling something she had never experienced in 2,000 years of life: fear. "How many member species have withdrawn from the Alliance?" she asked her aide. 7 confirmed, High Counselor. "The ethereal ones have recalled all their ships. The Shardhai have closed their borders. Even the Gronak are refusing to provide materials for new vessels. And the humans? They continue to resist. Our latest intelligence suggests they have somehow increased their ship production, despite losing most of their colonies." Thexaran moved to the great window of her chamber, looking out at the stars that had once represented the extent of Council power. Now each point of light might hide human raiders or rebellious subject species. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "They are one primitive species. We are the masters of 3,000 worlds." Her aide consulted his crystal tablet. "Our xenobiologists believe the humans are fundamentally different from other species we have encountered. They appear to thrive on conflict rather than avoiding it. Each defeat teaches them new tactics. Each loss makes them more determined. What do our strategic analysts recommend?" "Complete extermination, High Counselor. No prisoners, no negotiations. Destroy every human world, every ship, every trace of their existence." Thexaran considered this option. It would require enormous resources and might unite the galaxy's subject species against the Council, but it might also end the war before human influence spread further. "Very well," she decided. "Authorize the use of planet-killing weapons. If we cannot rule the humans, we will ensure no one else can learn from their example." But unknown to the High Counselor, her communications were being monitored by human intelligence operatives who had infiltrated Council space. Within hours, every human settlement received the same warning message: "The Council has authorized the complete destruction of our species. There will be no surrender, no mercy, no survival unless we win this war completely. All civilians prepare for evacuation." All military units prepare for final operations. As the message spread through human space, something extraordinary happened. Instead of panic or despair, there was grim determination. Families said goodbye to each other with courage. Factory workers increased production quotas. Even children volunteered for whatever jobs they could handle. The Council had made their final mistake. By threatening complete extermination, they had united every human behind a single goal. The total defeat of the Galactic Council, Admiral Chen Wei-lin, now commanding the largest human fleet in history, received her orders directly from Earth's military command. Take the war to Council space. Show them what happens when they threaten humanity with extinction. As human ships began massing for the final assault, species across the galaxy watched and wondered, could the impossible actually happen? Could one stubborn species bring down an empire that had ruled for 3 millennia? The answer was about to be written in fire among the stars. High Counselor Thexaran stood in the ruins of her crystal tower, watching the sky above Zethkara burn with the light of 1,000 battles. 3 years had passed since the Council had declared war on humanity. 3 years that had transformed the galaxy forever. Through the shattered walls of her chamber, she could see the final battle unfolding in orbit. The remaining ships of the Council fleet, barely 200 vessels from the thousands they had started with, fought desperately against a force that defied all logic and reason. The human fleet that surrounded Zethkara was not made up of human ships alone. Alongside the improvised weapons platforms and converted cargo haulers, flew vessels from dozens of species. The aquatic Murthani had sent their bioships. The crystalline Shardhai contributed their living vessels. Even ships from species the Council had conquered centuries ago now fought under human command. Status report, Thexaran demanded of her aide, though she already knew the answer would be terrible. The orbital defense platforms are destroyed, High Counselor. Our remaining ships are surrounded. Admiral Zexran's flagship was boarded 20 minutes ago. Thexaran closed her ancient eyes. Admiral Zexran had been one of the finest military minds in Council history. If humans had captured him, the war was truly over. What do they want? She asked quietly. Complete surrender, High Counselor. Dissolution of the Council. Establishment of what they call a galactic federation, where all species have equal representation. The idea was laughable. The Council had ruled through strength and superiority for 3,000 years. The thought of treating primitive species as equals was beyond comprehension. But as another explosion lit up the sky, Thexaran began to understand that her comprehension no longer mattered. Aboard the human flagship, Terra's Vengeance, Admiral Chen Wei-lin watched the final phase of the battle with mixed emotions. Victory was within reach, but the cost had been enormous. Humanity had started the war with 12 billion people spread across dozens of worlds. Now fewer than 8 billion remained, and most of their colonies were radioactive graves. But they had survived. Against impossible odds, facing superior technology and overwhelming numbers, humanity had not only survived but won. Admiral, reported Captain Torres from the tactical station, the last Council fortress has surrendered. Zethkara is ours. Around the flagship, ships from a dozen species celebrated in their own ways. The insect-like Zephyrians buzzed their wings in complex victory patterns. The plant-based Verdani pulsed with bioluminescent colors. The energy beings called Fluxari crackled with electric joy, all of them species that had once been ruled by the Council. All of them now free because humans had refused to surrender. Signal all ships, Chen ordered. Cease fire. Begin landing operations. But remember, we're not here as conquerors. We're here as liberators. The distinction was important. Throughout the war, humans had learned something that the Council never understood. Ruling through fear created only temporary peace. True victory came from giving people something worth fighting for. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as humanity's chief diplomat, materialized on the bridge through the ship's holographic communication system. She was broadcasting from Earth, where the new Galactic Federation's charter was being written. Admiral, she said with a tired smile, the Council leadership has agreed to unconditional surrender. High Counselor Thexaran herself signed the documents 10 minutes ago. Terms? Admiral Chen asked. Complete dissolution of the Council's governing structure. All member species granted immediate independence. War reparations to be paid to devastated worlds. And most importantly, establishment of the Federation as a democratic alliance. The Admiral nodded grimly. The terms were harsh but fair. The Council had spent 3 millennia conquering and enslaving other species. It would take decades to undo that damage. What about the council species themselves? She asked. We can't just abandon them to chaos. They'll be offered membership in the Federation like everyone else, Dr. Chen replied. With equal representation and equal responsibilities. No special privileges, but no persecution either. It was a remarkably generous offer considering what the Council had tried to do to humanity. But then, humans had learned something important during the war. Turning enemies into allies was more valuable than simply destroying them. On the surface of Zethkara, human Marines moved through the Crystal City with careful precision. Their orders were clear: secure Council leadership, protect civilian populations, and begin the process of transitioning to Federation authority. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez led her squad through the crystalline corridors of the Council's main government building. The alien architecture was beautiful but alien, all flowing curves and impossible angles that seemed to bend light in strange ways. Contact ahead, whispered Corporal Kim from point position. Multiple Keth Mori in what looks like a conference room. Rodriguez moved up to assess the situation. Through a transparent wall, she could see a dozen council officials huddled around a table. They looked defeated and afraid, nothing like the arrogant rulers who had declared humanity a pest species 3 years ago. Attention council officials, Rodriguez announced through her suit's translator. This is Sergeant Rodriguez of the Earth Federation Marines. You are under protective custody. Please remain calm and follow our instructions. One of the Keth Mori, an elderly female with silver scales, looked up with ancient eyes full of confusion and defeat. Why? She asked simply. Why do you not simply kill us? We tried to exterminate your species. Rodriguez considered the question carefully. It was one that many humans had been asking themselves as victory approached. The Council had shown no mercy when they held power. Why should humanity be different? Because, Rodriguez said finally, we're not you. The simple answer carried the weight of everything humans had learned during the war. They had discovered that becoming like their enemies was just another form of defeat. 6 months later, the first session of the Galactic Federation convened on the neutral world of Haven, a planet that had never been claimed by any major power. Representatives from over 300 species gathered in a chamber built specifically for the occasion. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, now serving as the Federation's first Secretary General. Around her, the assembled delegates represented every form of life the galaxy had produced. Crystalline beings sat next to energy creatures. Aquatic species communicated with atmospheric entities. The diversity was staggering. 3 years ago, Dr. Chen began, the Galactic Council declared war on humanity because we refused to submit to their authority. They believed that superior technology gave them the right to rule over other species. They believed that might made right. She paused, looking around the chamber at species that had been enslaved, conquered, or oppressed for centuries. Today we prove them wrong. Today we establish a new principle for galactic civilization, that all sentient beings have the right to determine their own destiny. That cooperation is stronger than conquest. That diversity is our greatest strength, not our greatest weakness. The response was overwhelming. Delegates cheered, buzzed, flashed, and communicated approval in hundreds of different ways. For the first time in galactic history, every species had an equal voice in their own government. But perhaps the most remarkable moment came when the Keth Mori delegate, the former High Counselor Thexaran herself, rose to speak. I have lived for over 2,000 years, she said quietly. I have seen the rise and fall of civilizations. I have witnessed the conquest of 1,000 worlds. But I have never seen anything like what humanity has accomplished. She looked directly at Dr. Chen as she continued. You defeated us not just in battle, but in spirit. You showed us that our way of ruling was wrong. You proved that strength without wisdom leads only to destruction. And most remarkably, you offered us redemption instead of revenge. The former ruler of the galaxy bowed deeply to the human representative. The Keth Mori request permission to join this federation as equal members. With no claim to special authority or privilege, we wish to learn what it means to cooperate instead of dominate. The vote to accept the Keth Mori into the Federation was unanimous. Years later, historians would struggle to explain how one primitive species had brought down a galactic empire. They would analyze the tactical innovations, the technological adaptations, and the strategic brilliance that had won the war. But the real answer was simpler than any of them realized. Humanity had won because they refused to give up. They had faced impossible odds and kept fighting. They had suffered terrible losses and kept adapting. They had been threatened with extinction and used that threat to unite not just their own species, but dozens of others who had lived under council oppression. Most importantly, they had remembered that victory without honor was just another form of defeat. They had shown mercy to their enemies, offered friendship to their former oppressors, and built something better from the ashes of the old order. The council had declared war against humans and sparked their own extinction. But from that extinction had risen something the galaxy had never seen before. A civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. Diversity rather than dominance, hope rather than fear. It was, the historians would eventually agree, humanity's greatest victory,